Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We're a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring a fresh perspective to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. Today we are going to be talking about a key report that has evidently created a lot of stir in India. The Economist Intelligence Unit's Global Liveability Index, which was released a few weeks ago, featuring 5 Indian cities at an abysmally poor standing, has both made us take a hard look at our cities and at the same time sparked conversation around a very pertinent topic, cities in India. Before I introduce you to our guest for the conversation today, we are accepting applications for our graduate policy courses. The course starts on September 3rd. Apply now to avail 10% early bird scholarship. Today, we will be in conversation with Varun Kaushik. He's an architect based out of New Delhi, where he heads the Studio for Interdisciplinary Design. He's a faculty at the Physical Planning Department at the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, as well as Urban Design Department at Sushant School of Art and Architecture. Before I bombard Varun with my questions, I'm going to give you a broad overview about the Global Livability Index report. So, the key findings from the report are as follows. The livability index around the world has improved on the grounds of COVID restrictions being eased. There has been a visible impact of the Russian invasion on Ukraine, whereas cities from Eastern Europe and Russia, Ukraine have drastically fallen in the list of livability. Um, Quite evidently, cities from Western Europe and Canadian cities dominate the ranking, and Damascus, Tripoli, cities which regularly feature social unrest, terrorism, conflict, etc., feature at the bottom of the ranking. So, I mean, just to give you a brief, top 10 positions are by Vienna, Copenhagen, Zurich, Calgary, Vancouver, Geneva, Frankfurt, Toronto, Amsterdam, Osaka, Melbourne, whereas the bottom 10 position is Tehran, Harare, Dhaka, Karachi, Tripoli, Lagos, Damascus, etc. Now, before we actually dig into our perception, our views on the report, the broad areas that this report covers, and I mean how the rating is calculated is as follows. Category 1 includes stability, which has a 25% weightage, which includes prevalence of petty crime, violent crime, threat of terror, threat of military conflict, civil unrest. Category 2 is healthcare, which weighs 20% of the total weight, which has availability of private and public healthcare, availability of over-the-counter drugs, general healthcare indicator. Category 3 is culture and environment, which again has 25% of weightage, which has temperature, discomfort of climate for travelers, level of corruption, social religious restrictions, level of censorship, sporting availability, culture, food, consumer goods, service, etc. Category 4th is very important, which has a 10% weightage, which is education, availability of private and public education. And last and final is infrastructure, which again has a 20% weightage, which is quality of road network, public transport, international link, housing, energy provision, water provision, telecommunications, etc. Now, before we jump into how Indian cities have fared on this index, I just want to ask Varun, what are your views on the report in general? What do you think that the five categories that it covers a holistic view of livability to begin with, and then we can sort of talk about Indian cities. So just your cursory views on what do you make of Global Livability Index report?
Hi, Ritul. I I kind of agree with the five parameters on which they are judging the livability of a city. There might be some more, but for now, this is a good set of parameters where you can start to judge the livability in a city.
Okay.
My only issue with this kind of report is that one it comes out every year and it takes into consideration very short term indicators, and cities don't evolve over months.
Yeah.
So for example, Frankfurt, from last year to this year, Frankfurt jumped 32 ranks and is now ranked 7. primarily because the restaurants and theaters opened up after COVID.
Yeah.
I mean, you see what I mean? It's such a short term upheaval in rankings that these rankings kind of lose their meaning in real livability, at least in my understanding of Indian cities.
No, I
So
think
that
I think it's a very important point because I was just wondering about the utility of these ranking, wherein in terms of policy priorities. So should the government sort of look at these indexes report, and if they become the target, then we're sort of trying to chase targets which are evolving every year. And what is the sort of role of policy shaping in terms of these indexes? But this is something again which we can come to later. But yeah, getting back to your views on the
no,
on
but
the
see
report.
again, again to just kind of carry forward what you are saying. Policies, there are no generic policies. Policies only like design. They only make sense when they are very target specific, when they are contextualized. So one size fits all. There is no policy that fits. So these reports, they have a particular use, but it's not to. I don't think this use is for cities to try to align themselves to this ranking that changes every year on minor upheavals.
Yeah, yeah,
So one reason that I see this report is put out is because a lot of companies, they provide quote unquote hardship allowances to their expat employees for
hmm.
relocation.
Wow, yeah, okay,
And now you see that, okay, there is, yes, I think we need this kind of a report to serve that purpose. But
yeah,
I don't think these kind of, it's the same purpose as what state government should be worrying about.
yeah, okay,
These are two different directions, two different set of people making two different policies.
yeah, okay. Quickly jumping into to a topic which is of subject interest to me and I think a lot of our listeners, which is the status of Indian cities. And evidently, as I mentioned earlier, that the report has created a lot of stir because Indian cities have performed abysmally. You know, for the first time, a total of 5 Indian cities featured on the list, wherein earlier it used to be just Delhi and Mumbai. Now we had the inclusion of Ahmedabad, Bengaluru, and Chennai. Uh, but the results were shocking. And to some extent, when I look around, walk around, I feel it to be true. Delhi was 140, Mumbai was 141, Chennai 142, Ahmedabad 143, Bangalore 146 out of 172 countries. And a lot of our indicators were similar to countries like countries in Nigeria, countries in South Sudan. So I mean, what do you think about it? Like, there is some grain of truth to this for sure. So I mean, as you say that we should take this with a pinch of salt, but I'm certain that there is some grain of truth, and we don't have good cities. I mean, just to put it bluntly, that we have poor cities, which is evident in a report. We might not be chasing these indicators wildly and shaping our policies for them, but where do you think our cities sort of go wrong?
Look, I'm in no way am I exclaiming that Indian cities are not even perfect. They are not even livable to
Yeah,
the standards that I want. They are not even livable. They are not desirable.
yeah,
So I'm not. It's only when you start with the conversation of the report, I
yeah,
want to kind of be the devil's advocate and not get carried away by this. Because, see, this is the problem that our Indian cities are actually facing right now. We are
hmm,
trying to mimic global north development standards,
yeah,
and that, when we already know
hmm,
exactly, that was the exact path that humanity took to reach this unsustainable way that we are living on this planet.
okay. I mean, just on a tangential note, when you say that, the first thing that comes to my mind is of Gurgaon, wherein It's a city of shimmery glass buildings, which has which has contributed incredibly to Gurgaon being an urban heat island, because of course it's a dry land area. There are no trees, and then you build these glass buildings, and then because you build these glass buildings, you need X number of ACs, and then the emission from the ACs and the reflection from these buildings sort of make it. I mean, just imitating the West wildly. So okay, on this is on an interesting note. So if you say that imitating West is not the good way, I mean, West is what I'm assuming as a blanket for both European and American.
The global north.
The global,
Let's
yeah. So
uh,
imitating West is not the good way. What do you think is the right way for Indian cities? Should we devise our own? And like, what do you think is the way forward for Indian cities? Have we given up on replicating the Western models? I mean, I know as a matter of fact, we tried it with Chandigarh and other cities, but have we given it up? And like, how do you see this landscape?
but see, this was a good example that you gave of Gurgaon. So
Yeah.
I know the problems that you mentioned. They are they are literally the tip of the iceberg of the problems of
Just
problem.
just to add before we get a elaborate response from you, because I want to understand what sort of problems do you see from a designer point of view where our cities are lacking. I mean, funds and all, policy politics, which are will always be there, but just from a designer point of view, I mean, this is just, I mean, for the lack of word, this is just stupid design element that you put glasses in a dry hot area. This is just bizarre to me as a layman. So, I mean, your take on that. As a designer, where do you see the problem, and what kind of intervention can we do?
Now, see, there is a very good reason why we got caught up in this race of quote unquote looking like developed cities. It was when the FDI came in and we started to, all the malls and all the we started to get things that we had never seen in our country, and that our aspirations evolve, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing for a community, for a country to have its aspirations higher. But where we lost our way, I'll give you continue the example of Gurgaon. So right now, the first thing we see is that this stupidity of resourceful madness. Like there is no sense to as to why would you do these kind of buildings. But even bigger problem is that if you look at Gurgaon as a city, all of this shimmeriness is this one facade of the city. You go 100 meters beyond this, literally in we study with the students, and then you go 100 meter beyond this shimmering facade of development, and it's ignored. It's so badly ignored. The point of Chandigarh. When they installed Chandigarh, they literally erased all the villages. I'm not exaggerating. They erased all the villages and then superimposed the plan of Chandigarh. They didn't do so well in Gurgaon. The urban villages around which all this development came up are trapped. You see it in Mohali trying to imitate Chandigarh, but without erasing the worst segregation of this new urbanity and the villages around which the cities come up. So this is this friction that we are creating in our cities.
Yeah,
This deliberate act of dividing and marking who is above
yeah.
who's beyond the boundary wall, creating newer and newer fences to keep the same people out. That to me is the we like
Very
to believe that we are a democratic country, but we definitely don't have democratic cities.
On an inquisitive note, what do you think? This is this an outcome of design, or is this an outcome of our? I mean, this is moving into the realm of sociology, but is this the outcome of our inherent biases, or sort of inherent societal structure, hierarchy, etc., that we see the kind of cities? Because we see, as you mentioned, I mean, it's very hard to spot anything wrong in Chandigarh. wherein there are islands of urbanity which is so beautiful, and right next to that there is like people living in impossible circumstances, which we can't even imagine. So which way do you think it is coming from? Is it the consequence of design, or is it the consequence of our societal biases and structures, hierarchy, etc., that we've sort of now been into this sort of setup?
I think it's after an earthquake there are aftershocks.
Yeah,
So I think this is a colonial aftershock that we are experiencing right now.
can you expand on that thought?
So this was in during all this colonialism. After it, we were such a struggling set of community
Yeah,
that everyone was for themselves.
yeah,
Everyone. It was really survival of the fittest kind of environment. And then today, when we are picking up some pace in
yeah,
the middle class becoming capable enough to desire more than food and shelter, I think our aspirations are still, now we want to become the new sahib.
mm,
Whoever,
mm,
there is this new sahib in the town, which is not, which is just the same color as everyone.
yeah. On that note, let's take a small break before we move forward in this conversation. All right, welcome back. Thank you for that, Varun. Before we sort of understand more about Indian cities, I want to know that why are we not, like, what causes this divergence in our cities? Why are we not proud of our shared public spaces? I mean, as Indians, we keep our houses impeccably clean. It's it's a very cultural, religious purity idea of cleanliness. But the moment you move out, the moment you step into a public space, you see spit, litter, people urinating in open, etc. All sorts of things that can go wrong are going wrong out there. Do you have an explanation to that as an urban planner? And what do you think about just this whole thing, that are our urban spaces designed in a wrong way, or it is a more socio-cultural problem that nobody has stakeholdership, or there are caste hierarchies that upper caste feels that cleanliness is the job of somebody below them? So what do you think? And if I mean, whatever the case be, where can design help it improve? And before we jump into your idea of new Indian urbanity in which you've done some work, I mean, I want to understand this.
So that's a good question. I think the problem is that right now the bureaucrats are the designers.
Yeah, okay. Shrugging it away,
And
right? Okay.
no, I mean everyone is, so it's when bureaucrats are designers or designers are part-time bureaucrats,
Hmm.
then the concern is not the user. The
Yeah.
concern is alter agendas. That there
Hmm.
are different weird agendas that you are not really designing. It cannot be called design anymore. And it's
Okay.
true that we keep our houses spick and span, and then we go out and then we feel free to spit or litter. Actually, not really. You go to, let you go to Delhi Metro,
Yeah.
and no one does that. Not because they don't do it outside the metro premises, but they don't do it because they see that everyone around them is proud of what they have received as a public accessory.
Hmm.
And if they do it, then the collective is going to call them out.
Yeah.
And when they go otherwise in outside in the city, the quality of our shared domain is so much worse than expected
Yeah.
that no one feels like anyone would bother if you deface it. we
So you
we would
say
try
you
we try to put, we try to do this by policing,
yeah.
but that's so counterproductive. The more you tell people not to do something, the more enjoyable it becomes. So you have to do it by
Yeah.
design.
Yeah.
You have to give them
Exactly.
something to be proud of, that they would just not wanna ruin.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
We can
interesting.
give
I
whatever
mean,
excuses. We can give
yeah,
excuses, that nahi people are like this, they are not educated, they are illiterate. Man, just go to the metro and the most illiterate person is watching you not ruin his metro.
true, true. Lots of thoughts running from there, but I want to sort of ask you that where do you think then programs like Swachh Bharat Mission come in here? Because essentially they are nudges to people and visible nudges that it's out there on a board that all the dustbins are branded, etc., etc. So where do you think programs like how do you see as a professor, as a planner, architect, that the impact or the importance of such programs to keep up our public spaces?
No, I don't discourage any form of organization or any form of improvement in cleanliness or public rearrangement. So there are visible positives of Swachh Bharat mission that even just the fact that the frequency of garbage collection is
Yeah,
more. That
yeah,
itself is a progressive step. Where I find it a bit tricky is that it's you again you create a wall, you paint a nice painting on it that has this Swachh Sarvekshan 2021 and a nice colorful painting. But the fact that you have this boundary wall behind which people can throw garbage
yeah,
is literally what some of our politicians do when foreign dignitaries are coming. They literally board up the slums along the way. I mean, please don't just this is faking it.
yeah.
So that does not help anyone in the long run. Again, in the short term, maybe it makes sense, but cities are never short term.
All right, I want to move to a next topic here. As you say that the European or the Western model does not work in Indian context. You know, we've tried with Chandigarh, and we've ended up is erasing villages or sort of building these islands and then sort of sidelining our space, like sidelining the local inhabitants of that area, which of course has intended, unintended consequences because it will lead to some sections being extremely prosperous and some sections being extremely deprived in like a very small sort of radius, which will again lead to, sort of a back and forth, crimes, etc. Like lot of it will be there'll be underplay of it. So we discredit the Western imitation. What do you think in that case is a new model for an Indian city? Like what according to you should the foundation of an Indian city look like? Or what according to you should be the values of new Indian urbanity?
Okay, that's almost a 30-year, at least a 30-year long exercise that you just asked me to answer in a 30-minute podcast. But
Yeah.
I think maybe it would be fair for me to just say where I think we should start.
Hmm.
So there are people taking care of education, there are people taking care of healthcare, there are people taking care of infrastructure, let's say. But as a designer, as a city planner, urban designer, I feel we need to start at making sure that our shared public domain is equally accessible and owned by everyone, no matter who you are. I'll give you an example. Today,
Hmm.
our streets are understood as a continuous vehicular domain. That's very
Yeah.
I feel in our cities that's very obvious
Yeah. Yeah.
definition
There
of
is
a
no
street.
space in Bangalore to walk. I mean, I wholeheartedly
Yeah,
agree to that. As a runner, you have like my sentiments.
yeah. So we have come to an agreement
Yeah.
collectively that streets are for vehicles.
True.
And you know what that has done? While streets should prioritize being part of a continuous pedestrian domain,
Yeah.
and hence, if we switch to this second understanding of streets, what will
Hmm.
start to happen is the streets will swell up, not barricade themselves when they encounter a park, plaza, a ghat, a chalk.
Yeah.
And that is what I'm coming back to the same idea of mimicking Western models of development.
So to begin with,
You
I
know,
think
we are
inclusivity. Yeah.
I mean, look, inclusivity is in many different horizontal
Hmm.
verticals. There can be there is we need inclusivity in education. We need in many, but in terms of physical urbanity,
Yeah.
city design, I think we need to understand that public space is shared, and we need to create the shared space in our cities to encourage trust between people, not the other way around, which is currently what we are. Literally, it is in every all the smart city projects. They create some kind of cosmetic upgrade and then
Hmm.
barricade it and tell people that, oh, this is too nice for you to access it. That's the stupidest city possible.
Okay, fascinating. I have, like, before we move to the end, I want to ask you a question which has always intrigued me, which is, how is a city built? Can you build, does it organically grow? I mean, Alan Bertod in his book Order Without Design writes that cities planners should not try to alter the distribution of city size. Let them grow organically. And how do you make a productive city? He lists out three conditions, which is firms and households have the freedom to stay put or migrate at will, travel within the city remains fast and cheap, and real estate is sufficiently affordable that it does not distort the allocation of labor. So this is one idea, that let it organically evolve. There is just no physical limit to a city, which we see in a lot of Indian cities. And the other idea is that you have a top-down design approach to the city, which is what China did with a lot of cities, or the Soviet did with the central planning, or we tried with Lavasa, Chandigarh, and like a bunch of cities. So, what, according to you, is how do we build a city? Should it be organic or like a top-down approach?
It kind of, I mean, it's always tricky to imagine cities as as a new organism. Even if
Yeah.
certain cities like Chandigarh, okay, out of, this was like a clean slate, completely new.
Hmm.
But we have to understand that today we are only into 70 years of Chandigarh.
Hmm. Yeah.
Maybe in 500 years, it would be it would have its own inherent Indian character.
Yeah.
So
But
first thing
as
is
a
we need
designer, are
to.
you looking at that sort of time frame?
No, I definitely want to look. This is very designers, we start to get too panicky about, oh, then what is our role if we don't do it
Yeah.
all? Then what is our
Yeah.
role? If
Yeah.
no, I want to. I think the role of a contemporary designer. Look, if you want to have any chance at coming up with a sustainable model of human settlement.
Yeah.
And the only chance is that you don't do it all, that you don't try to predict things that you obviously cannot.
Okay.
You just give the next person a head start.
Yeah.
So, what I mean by that is that you take what you get, whatever
Okay.
condition. If you get a rural, agricultural landscape where there are 20 villages, and now you decide Naya Raipur. Let's take example Naya Raipur. Okay, Naya Raipur is the same example. There are villages, and then you want to set up a new city, completely new city.
Yeah.
The model of having these huge master plans.
Hmm.
Take the case of Bhiwadi, Daruheda. These are satellite industrial towns, which as a developing country, there will be many coming up.
Absolutely.
But the idea of overestimating their occupancy and then
Hmm.
making master plans that occupy, that try to parcel out land that we know will not even be occupied in the next 25 years.
Yeah.
What that does is it only allows the land grabbing and the land mafia to, it legitimizes sprawl.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I mean, yeah, I know that for certain people and who with alternate agendas, yeah, that's their bread and butter. But for as a designer who's worried about, are we even gonna is our what are we giving to our next generation? What kind of problems are we setting up for them to face? I
Yeah.
think we should only try to we have to go with a different approach. A master plan is a very dated approach where you
Okay.
predict more than you can ever
Yeah.
achieve.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with seed strategies for cities,
Yeah.
which incorporate opportunities for failure for those cities?
Hmm.
You don't invest so much that the failure is too
Manageable.
much to bear, and then
Yeah.
you end up like Gurgaon.
Yeah.
There's no escaping this now. So again, it's a long discussion, but in a long story short, I think we should not try to predict more than necessary as a planner, as a urban designer, but work more on strategies that would give the next person a
A head
healthy
start.
head start, and they can take it further depending on the and then you educate the next generation to with good quality with this kind of approach, so it goes on, it kind of builds upon itself.
All right. Thank you. That's fascinating. My last question, we've already run out of time. So my last question to you is getting back to the index that we began with. So now that you have discredited the index, that we should not be looking at it or focusing at it, the government itself does an ease of living index, which actually surprisingly ranked Bangalore as number one in 2020. And for them, the ranking of cities have assumed significance in shaping government policies and determining expenditure priorities. So it's basically it also gives them an opportunity to measure the outcomes of the programs they've been running and verify whether these interventions were effective in sort of ushering progress in urban India. But then I completely agree that it's difficult to sort of, because of the dynamism at play, it's very difficult to quantify metrics and rank cities in X brackets. But then I personally feel it is also important so that one, you can prioritize, you have policy priority. Two, you can usher in a healthy competition between different cities so that there becomes a social norm, which has at least started off with Swachh Bharat, that cities are competing with each other, and citizens have a sort of understanding of it, that we want to keep our city clean to be in the index. So, what do you think? Again, cutting the long story short, what is the importance of such indexes, and how do you see it in the larger scheme of things as an urban planner?
I still don't see their relevance for long term policy making, long
Yeah,
term impact on cities. In the short term, maybe they can get the ball rolling fine.
yeah,
It helps in the short term, but my problem with this kind of approach is that again that this the key that we need to save is the vibrancy of our cities, and there is it's not about competing with each other, it's about understanding. Right now Leh is becoming like Gurgaon, and
yeah,
that's what scares me. So
yeah,
again, if in as per the ranking,
yeah,
maybe it works for that purpose, but the
yeah,
point is not to the whole point is to achieve and maintain the diversity that is India and the
yeah,
Indian cities.
yeah,
So if
yeah.
I think no other country can boast the diversity of customs and cultures and
Hmm.
climates and urban environments that we possess.
Yeah.
And my only worry with these rankings and these
They
indexes is that
they homogenize.
they encourage this homogenization.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe until we devise our own way of measuring our cities, and there is another index, let's say, which is for diversity. We will be back for another episode. But thank you, Varun. It's been lovely to have you, and I personally learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners also will learn. If you have any closing remarks, but thank you again, and we will see you in the next episode of All Things Policy.
No, this was a joy.
Thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.